Welcome back to For the Love of Humanity, The World is Your Oyster, Season 2, Episode 2. And this episode will be part of a duo, possibly a trilogy. I'm still working through that. But this week I want to talk about the divine masculine, balanced masculine. I'm started some guide sessions called Balanced Masculine. So that's going to be the topic for this week. And then I'm going to venture into Divine Feminine next week. And we'll see if I do a trilogy and talk about Divine Full Human for the third week. So, jumping right in, the aspect of divine masculine and feminine are archetypal experiences within the human being. And we also see them throughout nature, we see them throughout the universe, even when we think about it, right down to our inhale and our exhale, our taking steps, right foot, left foot. We can see this in the hemispheres of our brain. It's all throughout our biology, but left brain, right brain, we've got conscious, subconscious, and then this is where the trilogy kind of comes in. We've got super conscious, right? So we have the divine masculine, divine feminine, or the masculine and feminine unified, creating the divinity, like the overall human, the divine human, the super conscious aspect. And so to achieve a fully sort of exalted state of masculinity, this quote unquote divine state, is to integrate the opposing but not so opposing, the co-creative aspect of the feminine internally. And so that's how we elevate our experience of masculinity beyond what we see in our current cultural context. And within our current cultural context, it's sort of hinged on this idea of gender roles, gender performity, sexuality, identity politics. And that's sort of where it's been focused for quite some time, this externalized version of gender. And it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and the iceberg underneath is this whole other archetypal, metaphorical experience that is so much more deep than I think contemporary experience has led us to believe. So once we start understanding the mechanics of it, the energetics of it, the archetypal experience of the aspects of masculine and feminine, we really start to dive deeper into the symbiotic relationship of the two. Imagine the infinity symbol and sort of the undulating back and forth. Again, reference to the breath, the inhale and the exhale, right? The one after the other, feeding one another. They're both integral to the process. And currently, what we see are these collapsed expressions, these polarized dualistic expressions. So, think about for a minute how we see division on playground, how children in the playground are usually divided into boys against girls teams or segregated out, or how we see versions of masculinity and femininity that creep to the edges of the poles without really giving credence to the full embodied perspective of either. And so what we're left with is this collapsed sort of version that's sort of a veneer or a shell of the deeper experience. And what ends up happening is this, as I say, collapsing, but this cycle of frustration and burnout, this lacking of the intuitive aspects of each and how they work together. And so I want to focus on the balanced masculine because I think we're seeing a rise in the feminine. And to be honest, when you balance the masculine, you're balancing the feminine anyway. Like when you dive deeper below the crust and you start to understand that they're interconnected, you're not really looking at one or the other, you're looking at both. But for the sake of giving us putting a pin in it, dropping a pin, we're looking at the perspective of balancing the masculine for the purpose of this particular episode. And so I'm going to talk about what that looks like and from the masculine perspective, but I'm going to continuously weave in the understanding that this is, again, a symbiotic relationship that leans on the other aspect for this balance, for this exaltation, for this strength. So the divine masculine actually gains strength by integrating the feminine aspect. And that's what sort of powers him up. Like, think about Super Mario, you know, crushing that mushroom and like growing and becoming bigger. And that's really how we achieve this divine status. So if you're, feminine expressing and you're feminine embodied in this lifetime, and you really integrate your masculine aspects, that brings you into this divine feminine, superhuman experience of life. And likewise, if you're expressing as masculine and you're expressing your embodied masculine, and you really integrate that feminine side, you then sort of level up and become this divine masculine expression. And now I want to say there's a caveat here that we can express any which way we want throughout that undulating experience. So some people end up expressing a little more androgynous. They're a little more centered once they find their balance. Their balance actually expresses in a more androgynous way. And so that's the really incredible thing about having a human experience and having a human body, that we can dress it up, we can express it in a way that feels really exciting to us. We get to drive the body vehicle of whatever gender we have, and then we get to express it in whatever way we need to. So this isn't really about clothing, and it isn't really about pink versus blue. This is really more so about full spectrum expression, full spectrum embodiment, with whatever eccentricity, whatever your like flavor shot is, however you want to express your juice and your essence, that's really individual and unique to you. But there are archetypal energies that help us aliven, awaken, and support the expression of our divinity, which is the masculine and feminine. So this is not limited to what our genitals are. I want to really make that clear. However, we can be in a state of gratitude and reverence for the body we've been given, and the fact that we can experience pleasure in the way that we can. So obviously, male sex organs experience pleasure in a slightly different and nuanced way than female sex organs experience pleasure. And at this point, if you wanted to experience the opposite, I get it. I hope you figure that out. But it's a really, really wonderful thing sometimes to just lean into what your experience, your embodied experiences, and really have a reverence and gratitude for the vehicle you came in. And this is not to say that transitioning or shifting is inappropriate by any means, but just that it is our design and our birthright to enjoy the body we are given. And we all just should get to do that at a basic minimum level. And if we don't, my hope is just that perhaps even listening to this could lift some discomfort around that, and maybe awaken a little curiosity, awaken a little bit more interest into how to fully experience your body with pleasure, gratitude, and reverence, regardless of the package it came in, regardless of the form it came in. So, in talking about balanced masculine traits, as I started to mention, we can see them around us. If we think about, just like, let's take the archetypal form of the human body, right? Masculine being like seed planting, projecting, penetrating, the structure, the form. Whereas feminine being more the receiving, the creative, the womb, the nurturing. When we think of this in duality of the yin and yang, it's the black and the white being the masculine and the black being the feminine being the void, the feminine being the rich soil, the masculine being the seed. There are many nuances to this. And as I said, when you hear this, it might seem like, oh, but I have both of those. Exactly. We have both and all. So, the masculine being structure and the feminine being the flow, the masculine being the container, the feminine being the energy, the masculine being the stillness, and the feminine being the movement, the masculine being the positive, the feminine being the negative, and not negative in the unfortunately one-dimensional way we've learned positive and negative, but think more like electricity. Think more like electric charge, like masculine being electric, feminine being magnetic, masculine being language, and feminine being essence, right? Masculine being seed, feminine being egg. Masculine being holds and feminine being surrender, masculine being certain, feminine being creative, masculine being expansive, feminine being contractive, masculine being outward, feminine being inward. There's direction, masculine, allowing, feminine, tenderness, masculine, courage, feminine. These are all experiences, undulating experiences that when you start to really consider this, we realize we all experience all of these aspects. So it's really silly to then look back and sort of think about masculine and feminine as these polarity experiences that you're only going to experience in your body, one of them. But the underpinnings of our ideology around gender in the current context, I would say, is shifting. We are going through a huge paradigm shift. We already see it around us. But where we're coming from, the lens that we are leaving behind really supported this idea of a polarized experience, which really kept people from fully empowering. When we think about it, it's like when you only have access to one half of the circuitry, how are you expected to gain any sustainable long-term evolution, growth, power? So understanding the masculine aspects, we've been living in a fairly masculine dominated patriarchal society. That's probably accepted as common knowledge at this point. And so how did we get here? How did we understand this? Well, through our media, through the way we've been socialized, through the institutions that support these understandings. And so we pass them on from generation to generation. But in this polarity, as I said, it ends up being an unsustainable collapse of one into the other without the absorption of one into the other. So it's not like a reclamation of the feminine. We had, stoicism, but in a really unhealthy way. We had certain aspects of masculinity that were sort of, as I said, collapse. They weren't in their fullest expression because they weren't supported by the aspects of the feminine. And so the modern man, the new masculinity, the new concept of what masculinity is, I would argue isn't necessarily new at all. It's more of a remembrance or a recapturing. I would say a full recapturing of the masculine experience. And in a really beautiful way that can incorporate the aspects that we already have been incorporating. So when I say this, think about the fact that we already experienced those. So if you're a masculine identifying person, you already experience structure and flow in your life. You already experience stillness and movement. You are the container, yet you have energy flowing through you at all times. You already have emotions. It's just, do we look at some of these aspects internally and relegate them to subservient standing? So do we look at our emotions and think they are less than our thoughts? Do we look at our emotions as inconvenient and something to express or suppress rather than express? Do we look at our emotions as intel, as information, just like we look at our thoughts or the things we take in? And so when we understand this modern man, it's really this resurgence of a man who can incorporate all aspects and have reverence. Like, it's really about the reverence and the gratitude for all aspects, as opposed to suppressing one one side of the equation. So what we're doing currently is alchemizing the aspects of the old paradigm to reveal what is good, what works, what's next, and what serves humanity. And to do that, we need to take stock. So on one level, there is a unification process happening where we're uniting and unifying the aspects of masculine and feminine. However, there's a bit of a sorting through, a take toss experience that's happening where we're looking at, okay, we get to have the experience of differentiated masculine and feminine to the sense that we can see the difference, the nuance, which is a gift in itself. But in looking at that, let's look at the ways in which that nuance, where's the truth and where's the BS around it? Where's the inherent division, or not even inherent? Where's the division that's been contrived? Where's the forced duality and conflict versus where's the true experience of these archetypes? And so when we think about masculinity, we think about stoicism, but we also think about passion. And this is why I say we're a paradox. We're human beings are a paradox, but they're also the confluence point. We are the blender for all of the experience. And we think about, as I say this, the blender for all of the experience, I think about the Tao and like the yin yang symbol and just imagine it churning and turning. And that's what we're doing. We're taking in the duality of our experience. We're taking in the full spectrum of our experience, blending it through our body, like our mind, body, heart vehicle. And we're gaining reality and perspective from this. We're living our experience from this. And so we are going to experience both restraint and tenderness. And this is how, you know, blending these two aspects of this dualistic understanding of feminine and masculine is creating this reverence for the human condition, right? So the new man is a return, an exaltation. This man is aligned with clarity. He's inspirited. He's passionate. He's in service. He's divine. He's principled. He's flexible. He's resourced. So even though, you know, masculine is structure, the exalted new man, the aligned man, is flexible in his structure. So he's been able to take the aspects of masculine and feminine and marry them and unify them into a one step, two step, one foot in front of the other. Inhale, exhale. And he's missioned, he's calmed, he's able to master his own will and wield it. He's deeply connected to himself. He's embodied. You can't fully have an embodied experience if you flee the body and you don't take the emotions in, or you don't feel them and you segregate them off. It's like tying your hands behind your back and you don't necessarily need to. The new masculine is deeply connected to himself, who he is, and what he is here to do. He's connected to his deepest gifts. He's alive. And most of all, he's aware of the spiral, which the women knows as well. And the women can remind the feminine is deeply aligned to the spiral. The masculine understands the linear. The masculine can take that energy, the feminine energy, the feminine chaos, and organize it and structure it and put it in some sort of linearity. However, for a man to be in touch with the spiral and understand the cycles and the seasons and understand the need for the spiral and the cycles of creation, it creates an up-leveled experience. So the masculine is in reverence, the divine masculine, I should say, is in reverence of the mother, is in reverence to the mother. It sees the mother as this exalted reason to even be here. It helps. It realizes that the mother aspect, the feminine aspect, the nurturing aspect brings a robustness. So, you know, if you're thinking about this and you're thinking about your own mother or mothers that you've experienced, and perhaps this doesn't ring true for that archetype, it's not bringing you that feeling as you sit and just sort of feel into it. Think of the mother archetype in general. Think of the perfection of that archetype and really breathe it in for a minute. We have it all. And find that reverence for the women in your life it will help create more richness in the masculine. And so when the masculine is becoming the modern man, or the exalted masculine, the divine masculine, and again, I say modern, but it's just because we're coming into a paradigm shift. I think this is a reclamation of the archetype. We have an ideal of what this is meant to feel like when it is whole and exalted. And that's what we're reclaiming here. We're traveling from a collapsed version into a robust version. We're going from like a 1D through to a 2D and a 3D experience, a multi-dimensional experience, the full spectrum of what it feels like. And so man goes through this feminine stage to become present, to really drop into the body, to become aware of the depths and be present with the well of the feminine within. And until a man can really sit with this and drop in at that level, he doesn't get to unfold the richness of what he is. And so you might see this around. You might see this in people you know and love, where they really haven't dropped in to their body, where they're maybe living sort of on the external. They're not really feeling fully the feelings that are presented to them. Maybe they push away their feelings. Maybe they shun their feelings. Maybe they sublimate them. They, don't fully allow them to wash over themselves. And this is it's a disservice. I mean, it is a, at times, overwhelming sensation. Um, but you can't really feel your strength until you're fully able to sit with your wholeness of who you are, and until you can sit with the feminine within, that deep, deep well of energy, that deep, deep, deep river of creation. You just haven't unlocked the capacity for your full on experience. And so when man is able to sit with this feminine aspect and really integrate the feminine aspect, it balances out the masculine. It balances out the small mind. The ego thinking is dropped, and there's a deep, deep acknowledgement of the human capacity, of the human, of how incredibly intelligent the human vehicle, the human body vehicle is, and how incredibly multifaceted the human experience is. It's the river of the feminine flow, and the degree to which he can hold this and be with it, this feminine power, he can deepen in his masculinity. And it has to be experienced, not thought. It can't be, oh yeah, I get it. I cognitively get it. It has to be cognized, like actually brought down and in. So thinking about the energy around a concept being in your head and just sort of circling around your head. No, it has to be brought down through into your heart, felt, brought down into your belly, brought down, right down into your sacral area, right down into your root. And when you feel it that deeply and you can allow it in, and you don't tighten up around it, you don't get contracted around it, you really begin to embrace the fullness. And this is what the divine masculinity represents, this example of the exalted man who has seen all of his form. He's seen all of the depths and does not shy away from it. So this is the enhancing of your inner opposite. And it's really opening to the receptivity, opening to the reflection of the feminine within you. And it's so attractive. You can see a man really develop his virility through the appreciation of the feminine, through the understanding of the feminine, through the embodiment of the feminine. A man only gets more potent in his masculinity, like stands up straighter, broader shoulders. And this isn't just a bravado. This is like an embodied claiming. It's not a veneer. It's not a show. It's the deepest form of whole human embodiment. And it looks different for every human in expression. And we can see how women I can identify the overlay within them, the masculine, and how they wear it, how it's like wearing a color. We all wear a color differently, right? And so being able to hold both, being fully yourself already, it's like having fullness and emptiness all at the same time. It's empty because you don't necessarily need anything and you travel with everything you need, yet so fully fulfilled by the experience as it flows through you that you also, again, don't really need anything. So enhancing this inner opposite becomes like such a delight. And when we don't, we see man depressed. We see man empty and misaligned. And not empty as in empty, full empty, but empty as in void of life, void of color, void of that magnetic energy. And for a man to have both electric and magnetic energy is an incredible thing to see. Like, just, it's unfortunate we don't have a ton of, role models for this, in especially in media. Like, you might be able to notice masculine men, but like a real whole man. I mean, we see variations of collapsed masculinity. So a man who's hyper masculine, maybe hyper toxic, really domineering, trigger happy, controlling, fragile. And not that fragility is a problem, just fragility without knowing yourself, fragility, and then projecting that fragility in a violent way, right? We see stagnant, malignant, frustrated, under resourced, men arrested in their development, festering, disappointed, despondent, like hunched shoulders, like, not walking straight in their fullness, not erect, not and I say erect like a double entendre, like not erect in the fullness of who they are, not even having the virility that keeps them upright and just really full. And this is something they have a right to. This is something they are able to access if we weren't so pushed from the unification of opposites inside, if men weren't pushed away from their feminine aspects, because that's the key. Like, that's the key to unlocking the fullness. You have to unlock both sides and then marry the two together to experience this robust, potent, electromagnetic, like a man could draw to him what he needs with that magnetism that he learns from the feminine. It's the feminine aspect that's magnetic. And when a man learns that and becomes magnetic along with the power, there's nothing more attractive. And so Picasso said, our purpose is to find our deepest gift, which is like our deepest offerings, right? And then our mission is to serve this. And for you to come into coalescence with both these aspects, finding your gifts, serving them in this undulating experience, it just makes the whole thing hum. And so think about this even in teens. They're going through their most like hormonally chaotic time, imbalanced time in their life. And you see these, these beings go from like curious, upright, happy, skipping, imaginative, like they're already unified. They don't really see division the same way. And then they're taught to divide. They're taught to cut off aspects of themselves. They're taught this is what masculinity is. This is what femininity is. Get in line, keep them separate. Neither the two shall meet. And you see them start to get despondent. And because they aren't thriving anymore, they don't have that, fullness of their experience. These attacks at their inner regulation and their inner modulation end up having this effect where they start to slump over and they start to get jaded and they start to become dissatisfied and they start to lose their spirit, their energy, their vibrance, right? And so this is what I think balanced masculine can offer men, is this return or resurgence of being lifted by the energy of the feminine, being lifted by spirit, being put back into an exalted form, being inspired by the creative energy of the feminine, being enlivened by integrating this aspect. And we've spoken about different age groups, but even consider a man who's gone through retirement. He's finished his one mission. This is why I say this is in succession, right? We go deeper and deeper into ourselves. And a man who is, recently become retired has to go through the cycle, go through a phase of stillness and contemplation and sitting with, embodying the stillness, the still point to come to his next mission, to come to his next iteration. And for a man who hasn't been able to fully jump into that next cycle, we can see the frustration and the stagnancy and unfortunately, the life force just sort of petering out. So I hope this discussion has brought a little bit of clarity on the distortions of how we interact with and perceive masculine and feminine energies. And I wanted to make mention that this isn't just an experience for male and male identifying human beings. Feminine identifying beings and females also have masculine aspects. And it is my observation that the feminist movement has required a certain amount of masculine energetic empowerment for females to experience equality in an area where technically there shouldn't have ever been anything but equality, mutual receptivity, mutual reciprocity, and mutual respect means that we see the value in each of the aspects, and there's not a hierarchical arrangement of which one is more necessary and important. And that's why I think this conversation is so integral to dispelling some of the disinformation and dispelling the oppositional experience we've had. And so I think for a long time, women had to wield their masculine aspects just for recognition and equality and have these qualities such as boundaries, um, to have the more masculine traits. However, what ended up happening is I think due to the way we were entrained to see masculinity, women picked up masculine traits that weren't so sustainable, that were more on the toxic or collapsed end of masculinity. So, by virtue of attempting to call in our masculine aspects, we called in not the divine aspect of the masculine, but the contemporary disjointed or underdeveloped aspect of the masculine. And so what we're seeing right now is the reclamation of the feminine. And for me, what this actually looks like and what this actually means is women pulling in their masculine energies and really integrating those masculine energies so they're showing up in their full power and they're showing up in their expression, power and expression being like more masculine energetic traits that are absolutely part and parcel of the feminine experience. But when we understand that, we start to see how there's the unifying aspect of masculine and feminine traits within the feminine, the divine feminine human expression. And so we see that these women who are on the glow up, on top of their game, like really crushing it and really, stepping up, but in sustainable, empowered, reverent, grateful, just like happy to be in the body they're in, happy to represent the feminine form, really called to represent in that way, are really walking out this divine feminine aspect, because there's the integration of the masculine with reverence for the power that the masculine holds. And when we start to do this, we detach the energetics and the archetypes from the masculine people and humans that we know, and we don't see it as copying their traits so much as unlocking the masculine aspects from within, because these aren't owned by a particular gender that holds a particular set of genitalia. These are aspects of a fully formed human being, and when we can engage those aspects, we jump into the next level, this divine exalted level of human being. And so next week, we're going to pick right up where we left off and talk about the divine feminine and what that looks like. And I hope that this has been at least enjoyable, eye-opening, expansive, and provides you with some excitement.